Hello and welcome to Over the Binary, the official podcast of Gender Wellness of Los Angeles. My name is Grace O'Connor, she, her pronouns, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist at Gender Wellness of Los Angeles. In addition to my duties at GWLA, I also work as a therapist at Westwind Recovery, a dual diagnosis treatment center focused on those suffering from addiction and mental health challenges. My guest today is Dr. Elise Turen. Elise is a board-certified clinical sexologist and co-founder of the Los Angeles Gender Center. Elise has been a practitioner in the field of human sexuality for the past 37 years. She received her PhD in human sexuality in 2008 and also holds a master's degree in counseling psychology. Things are going to go a little differently today because normally Casey, Weitzman, and I host the podcast together. But with Casey and Elise's combined 70 years experience working with the transgender, that's right, I said 70 years, working with the transgender and non-binary community, I wanted to interview both of them and get their insights and their perspectives on how the community has changed and evolved over the last 3 years. Casey and I have talked about this many times in the formulation of this podcast, how important it is that we have people on who can reflect our history and reflect a perspective over time. So Casey Weitzman is the founder and the director of Gender Wellness of Los Angeles and has been a licensed marriage and family therapist for nearly 30 years, counseling children and adults who are exploring gender identity and or sexual orientation issues. So welcome to you both.
Thank you. Hi, thank you for having me. It's a privilege and a delight to be here with you both.
So good morning to you as well, Casey. Good to see you. Good to have you here.
It is great to be here and to be with my pal and my very old friend, Elise. That I'd say we've known each other for at least 25 years. So I'd say we've aged well.
Yes, we have. I agree with you. Yes, we have. Yes. And it might even be 26 or 27, but it certainly is 25. Yes.
Yeah.
May I ask, how did you two meet? Do you remember? Elise, do you remember how you two met?
I do. I mean, I know that we met. Well, I have many recollections, and it's really going back. I believe it was certainly at probably a Habigda conference, though it might have been, I really do believe it was, though there were very few of us who were doing this work back in the 90s in Los Angeles. And Casey was one of the few people practicing and doing the work the few of us were doing at the Los Angeles Gender Center. So yeah, I think it was at a Habigda conference. Am I right, Casey?
Well, what I remember is that I just thought you guys were badass. And I remember, I don't know if it was groveling, but I just was like, what am I going to do to have you guys bring me on board?
Well, the Gender Center had a lot of incarnations. I mean, it was started by really Marie Keller back in like 1992. Okay. But we met a very long time ago. I mean, because it was just really, honestly, really, you could count the practitioners doing this work on maybe only two hands. I mean, under, 10 fingers, really, like.
And I'm curious, Elise, what was it about the transgender community that drew you to want to work in it?
Well, truth be told, Grace, I had a calling to do this work when I was age 13. I mean, that's my story.
That's amazing.
I saw the original Rocky Horror Show as a kid, as a 13-year-old in, the back theaters of London. And honestly, for me, and I saw the original, like it was Tim Curry et al. And I remember honestly being 13 because I was young and thinking, wow, when he walked out onto that stage and they looked so ridiculously, gorgeously, amazingly better than any actually woman I'd ever seen in a corset. and a pair of, and I thought, oh, I'm so here. I'm so ready. I'm so right here. I'm so grateful. I know, really, it was emotional.
I love it.
But it was a revelation to me. And from that point on, I really honestly had a calling. Like, I befriended certain trans women when I lived in New York City back in the 80s. I looked for anything I could find in regards to research. You know, I wrote a paper on internalized homophobia in high school, you know, like all my friends were coming out. It was first wave of feminism. I'm sure you can understand that case. You know, a lot of my girlfriends were coming out as lesbian. I didn't know what I was, but I was certainly willing to be very much a part of this dismantling. And yeah. So.
And I wanted to just add to that because I did a little research, Elise, on some of your past. It was actually, speaking about the Rocky Horror Picture Show, I just wrote, like Elise mentioned in her love for the Rocky Horror Picture Show back in 1975, when I saw it, that's when it came out. It scared me because I was a bit naive at 15. And you wrote, don't dream it, be it. I remember seeing it with my mom and feeling out of place, or maybe more like, why am I here with my mom? I was just figuring out who I was, and this seemed so hardcore. Now, 47 years later, it seems so current, so relevant, and that's why it's a cult film. I also listened to you and a podcast you did in 2016 called The Boom Doctors, and that you really summed it up for me. And you said, my life's mission is to authenticate their honest expression, right? Working with the transgender and non-binary. And I feel so honored. And I'm just saying, I feel so honored to be trusted with their secret and help them believe in themselves and gain the courage and belief that they can transition. And so I think you and I have always had sort of the same mission, but you were so liberal, well, much more liberal in that.
I don't know.
Well, maybe you weren't liberal, but you were open. You watched it and you're like,
well, I remember what I felt. I was like, yes, it was a big old yes for me. And it was a lot of trouble coming back with that yes into like a middle-class Jewish family in New Jersey. Like, okay, yeah, right. Yeah, it was like, but for me, I don't know it. And it's, I appreciate your story and your memory of this experience, Casey. Yeah.
And now it's like a cult film. The kids see it and it's like very cool. And I was mortified, just like the Queen Mary in which we can talk about, but also that it was like, oh, so I think I was a square little Jewish kid from the San Fernando Valley. But again, I think all I would say about that is when I started, as a new therapist, I had to have 2 different sets of business cards because it was not embraced, right? When we started obviously in the 90s. So.
Well, that kind of leads me to the next question I want to ask you both, because you talked about having 2 sets of business cards, and you talked about there being under 2 hands of people that were working with the transgender community at that time. And I think it's easy to take for granted the kind of support we have today. But I kind of want to get your perspective on, outside of the LA Gender Center, outside of Casey, the work that you were doing, what other support was there for the transgender non-binary community back then? Were there any centers that were open in LA at that time? Were there medical hospitals that were working with the transgenders? So please, whoever would like to share on that. Very curious.
Go, Elise, because you were there before me.
Yeah, well, and I really am a little bit of an archivist, librarian. I really I do like to save things, and I find them critical to our work and our history, as allies and people serving the community. And so So I wanted to do this work. I just wanted to serve the community, and I wanted to work with, transgender humans. And I remember getting a piece. I went to Antioch to go get my graduate degree, and I was absolutely, I was devastated at the pedestrian and the banality of the graduate degree program in human sexuality. I mean, I was just, and I know it's much better today, but back in the 90s, it was horrific. And so I wanted to do this work, and everything I did back in my graduate program revolved around trans studies. I mean, I just did every paper I wrote. And so when I came out of Antioch, I wanted to I'd always been a therapist since I've been 23. So, I mean, I've been a therapist for 41 years. So there was a handful of people: Marie Keller at the Los Angeles Gender Center, a doctor, Jane Thomas, Dr. Marilyn Lawrence. The doctor who was prescribing hormones was Dr. Lev. Okay. He then turned his practice over to Dr. Richard Horowitz in the early 90s. And Richard's been, a provider in the community, a doctor providing, just general care and hormone care for the last, I don't know, as many years as we have, Casey.
Yep.
And so there was really nowhere to go. The LGBT Center would have nothing to do with trans experience. I mean, we got so much pushback every time we wanted to go bring something there or do something there, or it was like, it ain't happening. I mean, it was a whole different experience back then. Okay.
Yep.
And, maybe I used my privilege. I didn't even realize it, but yeah, I probably did as a white girl, and said, yeah, I want my clients and I want my community to, have some exposure. And there was a lot of pushback back then. It was just, but we kept pushing. And today it's a different story, so I don't know. I don't think, Case, please help me out. I mean, there were very few practitioners. There was Dr. Lev, then Richard Horowitz. There was maybe one or two. There was maybe
Dr. Alter was our one surgeon. And there was, just to add to what you were saying, what kind of support existed at the time. Support, there was barely any. And when you talk about the LGBT Center, we would, I remember, because I was so pissed off, there was no tea at the center. We would go over there, and I wanted to run like a lesbian support group at the center. And they would say, transgender women are not women, and they're not lesbian women. And so they're not welcome here. And the lesbian population was like, no, because they were born male and there's no place for them. And I was, as you can imagine, I think both Elise and I, you would agree, are a bit outspoken. And we were like, we're going to take our, what is it called, and get the hell out of here. So again, just like Elise said, where I went to school, it was like one of those days where there was a panel, where there was one transgender person, and there was one intersex person, and there was one queer person. And when you talk about non-binary and all the new terms, there was binary only, basically. And so that was the day. And so anything Elise and I learned, or anyone, we learned on our own. It was, could you sit in a room with someone, and Elise can agree with this, where a client would come in a three-piece suit, a male to female, maybe change for the session, and then get back in their outfit, their suit, and go back to work. And we are probably the first person in the entire world that they ever told. And yeah, and the honor that I think both of us felt to be with them in that space, the shame and the guilt, and like I said, no resources. We were each other's support, the LA Gender Center, because back then, before anyone could go on hormones or anything, it was sort of a committee. right? Talk about gatekeepers.
There was, people had to come and get letters for hormones. I mean, it was really a strange and unfortunate paradigm that all of us were trying to, in many ways, take down and rearrange because of the unfairness of it all. However, we were all, growing and, learning as we went along. And the truth is that, all these wonderful, terms today that humans use, I absolutely, and you did too, Casey. I mean, I remember seeing individuals who very much understood and felt themselves to be very what we would call bigendered. All right. So, and there was, and so, nothing's new under the sun, thank goodness, But then those of us who did this work began to create, like we would run a once a month support group for a long time.
Yes.
We just said, no one's doing it. So let's do it. We're going to do it. So
it was brilliant.
Once a month. We started a month community support group that was free, and we do everything from A to Z. I mean A to Z. We had doctors down. We would do, play therapy. We would do dance. We would do movement. We would do electrolysis. We would do everything and anything. We rented out space down down on off Olympic Boulevard at the theater. I forget the even name of it. Oh my gosh. And we would do anything to create community. And then we also started, I'm proud of this. We started the Christmas party, because nobody knew where to go for Christmas. And it was like, well, let's just have a party. We're going to give you a party. We're going to create a space for you. And so we started at the Women's Center down on Robinson. I don't even think it's there anymore. It's not there. And people would come and we would cook food, and we would be together, and we would gather, and we would have community. And we kept that going and going and going and going. And that Christmas party, honestly, I have to say I take a lot of responsibility for it, because I really did run it for 20 years. And it became, well, I'll tell you, it was a wonderful container for people. A, we had a good time. Yeah. B, the Abbey always did us solid. They were the best. All right. Back in the day when the Abbey just had that little thing in the back. Remember, Casey? That little, like it was
a dark room. It was like, we're going to hide back here with a rope. And
that little Abbey in the back. And anyway, and we would gather every year, and they always did us a solid. And and a lot of times it was people's first time coming out and dressing and being, and I mean, dressing, like dressing up and being themselves and just saying, we'll meet you there. We're here. Just come find me. And it was like, and a lot of magic happened.
And we provided hors d'oeuvres and danced. And I sure remember us dancing together and with
a lot of community.
And those first parties, Elise, that I think you guys threw even before I came on board, there were hundreds of people that came. I mean, it was the only game in town back then.
Hundreds, but I'm going to tell you, there were times where we would spill on out of that little place we rent. I mean, we just said, Marie and I said, and Maureen and others, we said, let's do it. And Casey, let's do it. Nobody's doing it, so let's do it.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah. I remember our party where it was over 100 people, and I think it was on Robertson. It was outdoors. This was before the Abbey, but I have to say the Abbey, I thank David Cooley, because he always gave us a discount, and each year it got bigger and bigger and bigger. I always thought it was a little interesting back then because I was so rigid, but that you're there with your clients and then everyone else's clients. And again, there was a need, but when you don't disclose, but then you're there, but I miss it. But again, now we have so many.
It always worked out because it was for the good of all, like it was just, it always worked out. It was just, I understand. I never considered you rigid. It's interesting you.
Well, I asked Grace, but I'm definitely loosening up in my older age. But I think the clients appreciate it because, like you said, the center really now they're on board for the most part. But
yeah. I will say that I went to those parties at the LA Gender Center and they were life-changing. You can't underestimate the power of community to be able to show up and to be your authentic self and to be mirrored by other people and to find a safe space. It's just invaluable. And,
we would have met. We would have met. So I did not know that. So it was a good experience for you. Well,
it was amazing. It was amazing. At the bowling alley, I went to some of those parties. Those were amazing. The ones in the Valley. And, I think it's really important to talk about the hurdles that the trans community faces, but it was really great to hear you both talk about the hurdles that as clinicians you had to face, creating these institutions, creating these mechanisms by which people could receive trans-affirming care. Makeup to electrolysis to surgeries to letters. It's just talk about the hurdles. It was great to hear you talk about that. But I also maybe switch gears a little bit because you two have been in this community for so long. And I think I just kind of want to get a sense of what have been the most profound changes you've witnessed from when you started working to when you're working now? What have been the big changes, the ones that really make your eyes pop and go, wow, I never thought we were going to have this?
Go ahead, Case.
Well, I think the thing I'm so excited about is the providers, the hospitals, the universities that everybody is now open and don't get me wrong, there are lots of still hatred and things like that, but that we have places. Every time I go on a WPATH, the site, they're always hiring new docs and new therapists. And this is throughout the United States that people want to do this work. And also the providers that Elise and I were talking about, they're still in the field. The electrologist people, Dr. Horowitz, Dr. Alter, they're still doing the same work we're doing 30 years later. And like I said, people are writing books about their own children and the mistakes they've made and how far they've come around. So I think it's really been quite profound. What do you think, Elise?
Well, I think, I think a couple of things. I think the profound visibility of trans and gender nonconforming or gender expansive or however we want, just the visibility of it worldwide, the ability for people, to find one another. Certainly technology has really, captured us all in that way. But, and it's, so number one, visibility. Number two, insurance. I thought I would never come to see the day where in the state of California, that if someone has a need, okay, and it is absolutely a legit need, just like me having high blood pressure is a legit need. I need medicine. Someone who has trans-related needs, they get their needs met. And and there it is. And it's normalized and medicalized and non-pathologized. And I never thought that I would see ever so many individuals with insurance covering and normalizing finally just the health care that people should be receiving. Okay, it's that simple, it's like high blood pressure. Okay. I mean, it's, I really liken it to that. Now, I'm not saying that gender isn't, high blood pressure can be quite confounding, and I'm saying gender can be quite confounding, and it's a construct, it's all kinds of things, but it doesn't matter. People need medical treatment, and they need life-changing surgeries. And so that kind of social witnessing and exposure is profound to me. I haven't written, well, that's not true. I was going to say, I haven't written a letter. That's not true. I wrote a letter the other day for electrolysis, but in a different way. It was these letters, it's normalized, and it's only, and I feel it's only going to become more normalized as it should be. So,
thank God for that.
Yes. Yes to the yes.
Have you?
And the only thing I was going to add to that is we're seeing so many young people now, regardless of how you feel about Caitlyn Jenner. In 2015, when she came out, it became a water cooler topic, because so much of my practice now is working with 11-year-old, 12-year-old, 18-year-old kids, where they're now getting so much more parental support. And again, I'm generalizing, but they're having the room to express themselves. And that I never thought I would ever see in my lifetime.
That was kind of what I wanted to ask you both, is the change in the families. The number one protective factor for trans folks is an accepting family, right? Like the percentage of people who are successful, if they have family support, it can be such a profound thing. And have you seen changes in families? Have you seen them rallying around their trans kids more, or?
I certainly have, because, the visibility, it's hard to walk in a place today. And if you asked maybe 10 out of, 15 people, if, the word transgender, and do you know someone who has, a transitioned or, claims themselves to be, or, they are, or, they'd be, yeah, yes, or, my kid or my. So I think the normalization of it is just, to me, most profound. And so you can't help but have that also just, ripple out onto a family and family members. There's just too much visibility, and there's good visibility today. There's appropriate, there's real visibility. Back in the day, there were things like, even like, what is that Trans-America? What was it with Felicity?
Felicity Huffman, Trans-America.
I mean, I hated that movie. I would never tell someone to go get their child, 2 days before their surgery. What? Yeah, go do a road trip and go find out your future and traumatize yourself 2 days before your vaginoplasty? Absolutely not. That movie infuriated me.
Yeah.
However, so excuse me, but I'm just saying there's just so much. So yes. Yes. And I personally do not work with children at this point. I mean, I have, but I haven't worked with children. And so I really appreciate you all who work with little ones, because that is a profound shift as well. I mean, that is just, one of the ripples of all this visibility. So, yeah.
Gender Wellness of Los Angeles, Casey, we can attest that we work with a lot of kids now. We work with a lot. It is really becoming a real focus of Gender Wellness's work. And it's family work, right? It's working with the families, it's working with the parents, and it's a family affair for sure.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. At least my parents will say things which just blow my mind away. Is thinking about my own family. It's like, gosh, are you sure? I mean, when my kid came out as gay, I was just so happy. I'm like, what? You're like, wow, I would have loved that. And it's like, how, if they're trans, that's a whole different thing. And I'm like, well, yeah, but I'm able to help them, family systems perspective. Like, would you rather have a dead child or a transgender kid that's going to blossom and not need mental health services soon, and just go out there and be a really regular, happy, normal kid. And I'm not saying there won't be issues, but there's issues for most of us. So I've just watched a lot of really good stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd love to go on all day, but we really only have about 10 more minutes. And there's just a couple other things that I kind of want to get some perspective on. And the reason I think it's important to ask this question of you two, especially, because as I mentioned, we've been in the field a long time, and you've seen the struggles that the transgender community has faced politically, socially, every other way. So are there issues going forward, do you think, that could be challenging for the transgender population? Are there issues you see in the trans community today that you feel could be problematic? Challenges that you think we might face, whether it's insurance or whether it's about, the wrong kind of visibility, or, Casey mentioned earlier about, Caitlyn Jenner being an imperfect messenger. She was a messenger, but she was an imperfect messenger, but she did open a lot of doors. I don't agree with everything she stands for, everything she says, obviously, but she was an imperfect messenger. So, as we're going forward, and as the gender spectrum is expanding, and we're gaining more knowledge about the terms that we use to identify ourselves within that spectrum, do you see any inherent challenges in that? I wonder.
Oh, wow. That's a big question. Well, absolutely, because I think these are just really difficult and very tense times anyway on this earth. There's a lot of tensity on this earth. There's a lot of division. I mean, I suppose there always has been, but it just feels like there's something pulsing that's even deeper and harder against us all, as a society, as a globe, and as individuals, So yeah, I mean, I do believe, that so much has become weaponized today in our society. I guess people call it that cancel or call out culture or all that.
Culture, yeah.
All that, like everything has become so weaponized, so easily used against. And I don't think it's just, the transgender community. I think it's the human community. I mean, I think the trans community have always been our leaders. They're my leaders. They've been wounded horribly by society, like they've been terrified. I think trans people terrify people because they dismantle everything and turn it all on its ear and say, there's just too many healthy transgender people in the world. There's just too, and they make everyone dismantle their own, narrative. And yes, one has to be authentic, period. And so, I'd only like to see, people become more, people of the trans community become more leaders, because I always felt that you are my leaders. You're my leader. All right. I listen to you better than I'd listen to somebody else, I must say. Okay. Or the experience of a trans human. Okay. So I don't think it's just a trans issue. I think it's a human issue. I do.
And yeah, the gender has been so binary for so long. And now we are starting to understand that of course, it's not a binary. Of course, it's much more dynamic than that. It's not black and white. There's not all male and all female. Of course, there are variations.
Humans know that if they tell the truth. If they are, able to tell the truth, all humans know that.
Yeah.
It's too threatening at times. I don't know, Casey, what do you think?
Well, I was just going to add that I think when Obama was in office, I felt like we were kicking ass. We were just moving forward and things were going great. And I feel like since Trump was in office, there was the politics and the hatred started, and the transphobia and fear. And the harassment that's going on, and what I can't remember all the states, but that they're trying to take away benefits and the insurance, and people, again, the population that are getting killed for being transgender. I think those numbers are going back up again with really uneducated and prejudiced folks. So I think we are going a bit backwards with all the strides that we've made and we continue to make. So that is troubling to me.
And it makes it hard on the trans community. It makes it harder. There's more barriers, more hurdles.
Yes.
So there's another question that I want to ask you both, and I think this is important, and then maybe this will kind of be the last question we have for today. And it's been so lovely talking with you both. It's been so lovely getting your perspective and sharing your experience around the trans community. And I have so much admiration for both of you for doing the hard work and putting those things in place that made it easier for folks to come out and live authentic lives. So I just want to say thank you both for that. One thing I think I would like to know is, how has working with the transgender non-binary community, how has it changed you? How has it changed you? What impact has it had on you in the time you've been doing it?
How is it not? how has it not changed? But how has it changed me in every way? I'm very lucky. I always say those of us who do this work, and we live in rarefied air. I live in rarefied air. We all do. I mean, what do I mean by that? All the illusion or the social construct of gender or gender expectation, gender role, gender, I've had to sit and look at my own and help others. And it has made me a much more wonderfully queerer human. And I'm so grateful for that. Because all humans are wonderfully queer if we allow ourselves to tell the truth. And I mean that wonderfully, wonderfully queer. Yeah. And so I have no illusion anymore around it. I'm not packed with any, I've had to sit and unpack mine and help so many others that I just see so many places to go, meaning that for every human who comes and sits with me, they are their own wonderful Rubik's Cube, and they get to figure that out, and they get to then be it. So I don't know how, I guess that didn't answer it, but I don't know.
Totally answered it. Absolutely. Had a profound impact on you. Thank you for sharing that. It was lovely. Casey, how about you?
Well, I'd say it's made me a more loving and compassionate person. I fell into this work by working with one client. Something sparked in my heart and soul, and I didn't know that, but working with this one client, he will say that I changed his life, and I always say to him, because we're still in each other's lives, he will say, I changed his life. And I say, you have no idea. You changed my life. And, that's why I do the work, because I've met him. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What a lovely note to end on. I just want to thank you both today for just being here and sharing your experience with us. And thank you, Elise Turen, for joining us today. Thank you for the work that you do.
Thanks, Casey and Grace, for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you for the work you both do.
Well, thank you, Elise. It's so nice to see you on screen. We don't get to see each other in person, but whenever I think about referring someone, you are number one on my list.
May we continue, all of us.
Yes. Yeah. And as a new generation of transgender affirming therapists comes into, right? And you get to share their experience, strength, and hope as well. So that's, God, what a great thing it is. Thank God.
Yes.
And thank you, Grace, for being a newly licensed therapist to carry on the work. We really appreciate having you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Thank you both. This has been Over the Binary, and have a lovely afternoon, everyone. Be well.
Thank you.
Thank you.